Today on Stronger Than Reason, we take a moment to reflect and think about the future. Welcome to Stronger Than Reason, episode 50. This is a milestone episode, so I wanted to take a few minutes here to recalibrate, to think about how far we've come in the last 12 months. I had the idea to start this show in early January of 2023. I think I did a week of brainstorming and recorded the first two episodes on January 24th. Back then, I was just recording on my phone. The setup was about as primitive as it gets. And I was just winging the content for the most part. I was just explaining where I was coming from and speaking from the heart. I did very little preparation and zero editing. In fact, I uploaded those early episodes the moment they were done, right from my phone. And since then, I've gotten a bit more sophisticated. I've learned how to properly record the audio. I've learned how to edit the video, which you may have noticed. But if not, that's great because it means I've done a good job. The show now has a more or less standard format, and I'm pretty happy with how it's developed. I'm especially happy to have gotten positive feedback. I can't tell you how novel and encouraging that was. So to everyone who subscribed, commented, or reviewed, thank you. I have to admit that part of my motivation for trying to do this show was to do a little experiment. See, I've been releasing original music online for many, many years. Writing and recording music is a hobby, but it's one that I've taken pretty seriously. My main musical project, which I do with a good friend of mine, has 7 albums out and counting. Then I have a few side projects that account for 4 or 5 more albums worth of material. So that's maybe 100 or so original songs that I've had a hand in creating, maybe a dozen hours worth of music altogether. But that actually reflects hundreds of hours I spent making that music. The end product is just the distillation of a lot of effort, as it is with a lot of endeavors. And when we finish an album these days, we just put it out there. It's released on every imaginable platform, Bandcamp, Spotify, Apple. It's just available everywhere. But the market these days is such that merely releasing something means absolutely nothing because no one can find it. Part of the problem is that there are now more bands or musical projects than ever because the technology has improved to the point where anyone with a smartphone can make studio quality audio recordings. And with just a slightly greater investment in software and hardware, you can make a complete home studio that can rival anything a professional studio from 1990 could do. So the music market is just absolutely flooded with millions of people flogging their homemade music. And in theory, that's a good thing. It's the model of the long tail, namely that this listenership curve stretches out so that on one end you have very few bands that have a high number of listeners, but most bands have relatively few listeners. The interesting thing is that when you consider the area under the curve here, under this long tail, the smaller bands in aggregate capture more listeners than the big bands. In other words, the area under this long tail is larger. Now that sounds good, it's very democratic, but the fact is that many of these smaller bands are just not discoverable. For the most part, the long tail is inaccessible without a lot of work on the part of the listener. But you're saying, wait, with the interwebs, it's never been easier to get your stuff out there. And that's absolutely true. The technology for getting your music out there is amazing. Just find a distributor who can dump it to every other major media platform and let them take it from there. But, and this is a Sir Mix-a-Lot sized but, the technology for anyone finding it is complete crap. The big problem is that none of the music platforms have algorithms that will serve up your basement band to a listener who might dig it. It's much more profitable for them to cater to the few artists that actually sell. In other words, they're focused on the part of the curve that isn't the long tail. And Apple Music and Spotify pretty much ignore homebrew music. Hell, we all know that Spotify is terrible for artists. Apart from burying your music, they pay out fractions of a penny for a stream, and now they've put payout thresholds in place to prevent smaller artists from getting paid at all unless they hit those thresholds which many don't. So in other words, Spotify found a way to blatantly steal from smaller artists. And all of this is pretty terrible if you're just trying to connect with new listeners. Suppose your band is a cross between Slowdive and Hot Chip. Wouldn't it be great if Spotify served up your band to listeners who built channels around those two bands? It'd be a win for you, and it would be a win for your listeners. Of course, that would be great. But that's not what they do. Why? I'm not sure, but it might have something to do with big acts having deep pockets and being able to pay to play, essentially the modern form of radio payola. I just know these platforms are looking for any way they can to keep the profits rolling in, and it doesn't benefit smaller artists. So I haven't messed with Apple Music at all, but I'm sure they're the same, and YouTube is totally tone deaf, so to speak, with regard to new music. They don't even recognize music as such. It's all just considered video content on YouTube because it's not really a music player per se. And Bandcamp, I have to say, is great for supporting the artist, but let's face it, their app kind of sucks compared to Spotify. Their consumption model is clunky at best. They just aren't able to compete in that space. So the upshot for new musicians is, yeah, you can get your music out there on the internet, but that's it. It's entirely up to you to market and promote your work, to actually connect with potential listeners. And just like 40 years ago, the best way to do that is to get your ass out there and play shows. Then, if anything, record your shows, put the videos on YouTube, and then pimp yourself on Twitter, Facebook, and all the other hateful social media platforms, all of which will take time away from you writing and recording new music. The other big difference now, of course, is the expectation that recorded music is cost-free. It's considered a loss leader for selling tickets. Anyone who actually wants to hear your music expects to hear it through Spotify or to download it for free on peer-to-peer networks, neither of which really pays you. So it's very difficult to make a dime just selling recorded audio. Of course, if you're popular enough, your fans might pay up for exclusive physical packages at various price points, but all that takes considerable upfront investment on your part. For some, it's just too much to deal with after all the effort involved in actually writing and recording the music. Anyway, it's possible that after nearly 20 years of observing the depressing state of music consumption, as a musician myself, I've developed a sense of futility about the whole thing, a certain feeling of cynicism. Our band did play shows early on, but there are logistical reasons that we can't easily do that these days, nor would we really want to. Honestly, we get pleasure out of writing and recording, not out of hauling our gear in and out of a smoky bar at midnight or throwing out my back, hauling some Fender Bassman or winding up in the ER. So we've pretty much arrived at the conclusion that we're happy to make the music and the hell with the rest of it. So for the last decade or so, we've just written an album, dumped it out there, moved on, rinse and repeat. And for sure, I think we have a lot of cool songs. The albums sound great, and listening back to them ourselves makes us happy. So it's enough for us. We just had to divest ourselves of the idea of marketing it in any way and just live with the consequences. Now, why did I tell you all of that? I mean, sure, it's fun to just complain. I mean, Lord knows. But there's more to it than that, because I've had this lurking suspicion for a while that I might be able to generate actual listener interest by producing something other than original music, making some other kind of content, namely doing reviews of popular music. So my theory was that people these days generally like what they already know. Attention spans, we know, have gotten so small that people, and I'm including myself in this group, really don't want to invest much time or effort to discover anything new. And if they are learning something new, it's usually because it's being shoved down their throats in some way, typically by some corporation with deep pockets. Generally, people want more and more content about the things they already know and love. Therefore, I hypothesize that someone should be able to present info about, say, old bands and have that generate some interest. In theory, if someone started a YouTube channel to do this, the algorithm would have a lot of solid keywords to work with, right? So it's possible it would serve up this material alongside all the other meta content about a given popular band or topic. And there just might be enough traction there for it to catch on a little bit. I figured for once the algorithm might work in the creator's favor. So part of my thinking in doing this show was to see if that hypothesis was correct. And I think you'll agree it was borne out somewhat. This show has been objectively more successful than my efforts with the band, at least in terms of listenership and engagement. But it wasn't entirely motivated by that social experiment. There's a less cynical part of my mind that was coming at this from another way entirely. And the fact is, I just wanted to express in some way my love for this music. So let me step back for a minute here. I have kids, and they're at the age where they're listening to their own music, and I occasionally find myself trying to explain my music to them, why I love it, why it's important to me. And it could be any kind of music, from classical to jazz or funk or the Beatles or Rush or Nine Inch Nails. And they do the same for me. So we have a two-way discussion about our music, which is great. And it occurred to me that I had a lot to say about my music. And I figured maybe I could organize my thoughts and say them in a more generalized way for fun online. And also in doing so, I could test this theory about people preferring meta content to original content. So you can see that several threads had come together in my mind, which led to me 12 months ago to start this show. And overall, I think it's been successful. It's been fun to do. It helped me get a lot of things off my chest for sure. It's been a learning experience for me. It gave me a lot of practice organizing my thoughts and saying what I wanted to say in a clear way. I learned more about the technical aspects of producing a podcast, which has been a lot of fun. And for sure, it's been an excuse for me to buy more gear, which is always great. But most of all, it's been fun to connect with you, some like-minded folks on the interwebs who are also into this music, and maybe to get something positive from the internet for a change instead of just endless horrible news and doom scrolling. To some extent, this has been my meager attempt to take back the internet for myself. I guess if I had a stretch goal for this show, it would be to have encouraged someone to check out a band or music or an artist that they hadn't considered before, to maybe take another look at an album that they may have bypassed the first time. And I can't say for sure that that's happened, but it would be pretty sweet if it did, because that would really be adding some real value. So you might ask, what am I hoping to get out of this? I have zero expectations. I'm certainly not doing it for the money. I obviously haven't earned a dime from this show. Quite the opposite, if you consider what I spent on gear and all the time I've put into it that I could have been doing something else. I am not monetized on any platform, YouTube or otherwise, and I don't see that changing anytime soon. This channel's growing, but very slowly. And even if I hit some kind of magic money threshold, I don't really believe in inflicting ads on you all anyway. I mean, why make YouTube even more of a cesspool of ads? So yeah, I'm not thinking about monetization. I'm pretty cynical about it, really. I don't really believe it could ever happen, so I'm not really holding my breath there. But you might ask, maybe more reasonably, what about using this modest little platform that I've got now to promote my other projects? And I admit I do have mixed feelings about sharing my own stuff on here, whether that's the music or the book or drawings or whatever. And it's tempting, especially given all the marketing challenges I just described. I think we all have a knee-jerk reaction to cash in wherever and whenever possible, right? At least those of us in America. But I do like the idea of keeping this show separate from anything I'm selling, because as long as I have that separation, nothing I say here can be construed as me trying to make a buck or hawk my wares. And if I end up mixing it all together, the show suddenly becomes a commercial for my stuff. And I'd lose whatever credibility or objectivity I have as a music commentator person. And maybe I'm blowing that out of proportion. I'm almost certainly overthinking it. I doubt if anyone listening right now thinks I have any credibility as it is. I mean, I'm just some rando on YouTube. So maybe it's all in my head. But for now, the idea of bringing my own stuff into this makes me uncomfortable. It seems to me this show is at the sweet spot interest-wise, because if I did have a couple thousand subs or whatever, or if I were at that big monetization level, I think it would be more tempting to bring my own stuff into it somehow. So it's probably best right where it is. I don't really have to think about it, and I'm not really motivated to make it grow much faster. Also, and this is super important, I like the idea of being fairly anonymous on here. And that would change as soon as I started talking about my own projects. They all have my name on them, and I'm not really interested in doxing myself that way. So yeah, I don't see that changing in the near future. But one thing I'm a bit proud of with this show is that it is all original content. Yeah, I'm talking about the music that other people have made, but the actual commentary is coming from my own unique perspective. And I do think it's true that I'm bringing enough of my own experience into it that no one else could really do this show exactly like I'm doing it. So to the extent that there's a following here, I do think it's well earned. I think it would have been easy to get a much bigger following just stealing content. And that seems to be the pattern on YouTube, which is really depressing. All it takes to get 45,000 subs is to post a bunch of funny clips from movies or from South Park or whatever that don't add any original content to it, don't add any extra thought at all, just blatantly stealing someone else's hard work. And it's pretty clear to me that YouTube as a platform and as a community rewards that sort of behavior. And how that stuff isn't immediately flagged for copyright strikes is beyond me. But that even is not the worst. The lowest form of video on here are the stupid reaction videos. I mean, who in their right mind is watching these? Why would anyone care about anyone else's reaction to something? Yet these people get millions of followers and views, and maybe I'm just a stereotypical old guy at this point, but I just don't get it. I guess some people are so hard up for entertainment that they'll watch some pinhead making duck faces at some other pinhead as they're opening a box or getting hit in the crotch. So yeah, obviously, I'm not chasing a huge following, because if I were, I'd be making reaction videos, and I'd be pretending I'm a voice coach and would be making tutting sounds while listening to Geddy Lee or something. And maybe that could be another experiment here. Start another series, Stronger Than Reaction. It's just me reacting to episodes of my own show, 45 minutes of me gurning and rolling my eyes and doing snide commentary like MST3K. So I ask you, would that show get a bigger following than the main show? Well, what do you think? So where do we take it from here? I don't really know. I do think that there will come a time when I start running out of albums that I'm super familiar with. It would be cool to learn about some new music, bands and albums and stuff that I haven't heard. A few of you have already suggested some of these, so maybe I could check those out and report back. There are also plenty of classic albums that I'm embarrassed to say I don't know well, so it would be fun to check them out, to give them a deep listen and make a show of that. I have a few other ideas for TED Talks to give as well, kind of like I did in episode 40, which was about making music. Someone else suggested doing interviews, but I really don't want to take things in that direction. For one, it seems like most podcasts are interviews these days, most of them with celebrities. Did you ever notice that? I mean, go out and look at the top podcasts. It's just celebrities interviewing each other, hawking their latest books, films, or albums, or whatever, and it's just a never-ending cycle of self-congratulation and self-promotion. And why anyone bothers listening to them is just kind of beyond me. Anyway, I don't think the world needs more interview podcasts, and Lord knows I don't know any celebrities, so I'm thinking that's more trouble than it's worth. Not even to mention the technical aspects of trying to set up multiple mics and deal with network issues and recording over Zoom or some crap. Just forget it. For now, I prefer to keep this as my own personal soapbox. It's just easier to have one voice. If someone wants me to interview them, that kind of means they have something they want to say. So they're probably better off starting their own podcast. I mean, if I can do it, anyone can do it. You don't need me to give you a platform. Now, 2023 was a pretty busy year for this show. I guess I was pretty into it because it worked out to roughly one show a week. And in the last few months, I've tended to release them on Friday mornings just in time for the weekend, kind of gotten into a rhythm with it. But that pace is not sustainable, if only because I have other projects I want to get into this coming year. Believe it or not, it takes me about 4 hours to prep for, record, and do post-production on one of these episodes, and that's a pretty big chunk of my spare time in 1 week. I have plenty of other obligations. Free time is a valuable commodity. And obviously, if I'm starting other projects, it means I'll have to route some bandwidth to them, taking time away from this show. So the bottom line is, yes, I do plan to continue it, but on a more spread out timetable. And I do hope to continue delivering in-depth episodes. I do like the longer format of this show, even though I know most people only watch for 5 to 10 minutes according to the analytics. But I just don't care. To me, this is more like an old-fashioned long-form radio show. I have zero interest in boiling what I have to say down to 20-second clips. I know most people can't focus longer than that these days, but so what? Those aren't the people I'm trying to reach. I'm just not interested in dumbing this down or trying to cram it into a shorter format. You may have noticed that I did try the shorts format on YouTube out of curiosity, but you know what? It felt unnatural and I didn't like it. So forget shorts. I won't be doing that again. I like having enough time to get lost in these topics, and I find it takes me about 30, 40 minutes to do that. If someone can't handle that, that's fine. They can find something else to listen to. There's always X or TikTok. But I know that some of you do like the longer format, and you listen to it all the way through. And as far as I'm concerned, you folks are my target audience. We're on the same page. So yeah, bottom line is I do intend to keep doing the show. I do expect episodes to come less frequently going forward as I dig into other things. In the meantime, if you have thoughts on subjects or topics for future episodes, please share them and I'll add them to my running list of things to consider. And once again, to everyone who's come along on this journey, who has taken time to reach out through the comments or reviews or to subscribe, thank you. Your interest and feedback has kept me going. I originally intended to have this editorial bit front the next album episode, which is about a very important album, but the stuff I wanted to say just kind of grew and grew until I realized I would be taking away from that album. I doubted anyone would have the patience to wait through my keynote address to get to the good stuff, or worse, would just fast forward through that part of it. So instead, I decided to break that album discussion into a separate episode, which should be coming soon. Maybe not in a week, but soon-ish, so keep an eye out for that. It's going to be a good one. My friends, you've been listening to Stronger Than Reason either on YouTube or as an Apple or Spotify podcast. 50 episodes and counting. Let's see what 2024 brings. As the Bush Bee man says, might be good, might be shit. If worst comes to worst and everything goes to hell, at least we'll still be able to talk about good music. As always, I thank you for listening, and until next time, stay strong.